Why isn't it going faster? This is taking forever. Why
Good,
isn't it?
good evening, everybody. Welcome to Hoops HD, our May podcast here, coming to you a month and a couple weeks after Villanova cut down the Nets as our national champion, still our reigning national champions. And let me start by introducing myself. First of all, I'm Chad Sherwood, your host. Let me introduce our panel as well. First of all, the puppet down at the end who is screaming about the college hoops countdown clock, David Griggs. David, how are you, and why are you screaming down there?
Well, in addition to the technical difficulties, the clock is just taking forever. I'm glad you told everybody who I am because for some reason Google is not letting me tell people who I am. So, I'm David. Thanks for being with us.
Right, and I think we still up there 175 days till the next season starts still. Long way away. But also next to David on my screen at least, John Stalika, John S. John, how are you doing over there in Xavier Land?
Oh, I'm doing quite well here, and much like David Griggs, I forgot to bring a name tag for tonight, so just bear with us all.
John S., you're over there in the land of a Big East school, Xavier. Also coming to us from the land of another Big East school, John Titel, John T. from Georgetown land there in D.C. John, how are you?
And home of the NIT champs, the Colonials. Let's give a little love.
Okay. And one more Big East guy who's also not the national champions, Marquette's. Marquette's right there, Matt.
Not twice.
Yeah, we're just a little short of that one there, Chad. Just a little short.
We have a lot of Big East representation here. I guess I'm the closest one just outside of Philadelphia, about an hour out of Philly with a little bit of Villanova ties, although I guess, John T., you got some Villanova, or at least some Philly ties in your past there. Not Villanova, though. But we have a few topics we want to get to here. What we'd like to do is come to you at least once per month during the off-season and watch David suffer through the countdown clock, not going as quickly as he wants it to, but we actually want to start, though, on a bit of a sad note, and that was the news that came out of Dayton. And John S., you being right in Ohio, tragic news with Steve McElvain over there in Dayton last week.
Yeah, apparently I think what happened was he had some kind of a heart condition that went undetected during a regular physical, and I'm trying to remember offhand if this is the same ailment that had affected guys like Hank Gathers and Reggie Lewis in the past, but definitely our thoughts and prayers go out to the Dayton community because we do know we have some followers up there in the Gem City.
Yeah, it wasn't due to any sort of negligence that the doctor didn't catch it. They just simply don't do echocardiograms doing NCAA or college physicals for college athletes. So he had this condition, probably had it for most of his life. And he wasn't, from what I understand, doing any sort of strenuous activity. He was at home. It was over the break, and it was very sudden and very unexpected. And they are, having known some people that are close to Dayton, it really has affected them. It really is truly sad. I almost don't even know what to say.
Yeah, it would just really going to echo John S. there, that our thoughts and prayers with the Dayton community, obviously with the young man's family and friends as well. Just such tragic news. We hate to have to talk about stories like that, but unfortunately we do. But let's kind of turn notes a little bit here. I believe that today was technically the final day of the spring letter of intent period, May 19th, and we had one more big signing today, and John T., I wanted to bring you in on this. You noted this, that Marquez Bolden, I believe, was the number 16 overall ranked prospect heading into next season, chose Duke over Kentucky. Your thoughts on what you've seen out of Duke and Kentucky in their signings for next year? Because it's been a little bit crazy with the two of them, I would think.
You would think correctly. It's like they're forming their own McDonald's All-American game. They have so many of them. Duke already had two of the top three in Harry Giles and Jason Tatum, as well as two others in the top 50, Frank Jackson and Javin DeLaurier. So that a five-star center who's one of the best in the class in Marcus Bolden is really putting them right up there. But Kentucky and Coach Calipari continue to get it done with 5 of the top 25, Malik Monk, Bam Adebayo, De'Aaron Fox, Wenyan Gabriel, Sacha Kalea-Jones. You talk about a team that just reloads every year instead of rebuilds. Like, they're the epitome of that. I don't know if they're going to be preseason number one or anything, but these two teams with Krzyzewski and Calipari. Every year they're leading the way.
And John, let me stick with you. Is it almost a little ridiculous here that we are having two programs like this bringing in multiple top, not only, I mean, each with 3 top 10 recruits coming? That's 60% of the top 10 are going to these two schools. Maybe we should just write them in for the national championship game next year. I mean, they both got a starting 5 among that probably can compete with anybody in the nation just in their freshmen that are coming in next year alone.
In the regular season, correct. As we saw last year, I don't believe either of them made the Final Four or anything, so it certainly is not a harbinger of Villanova's veteran leadership under guys like Arcidiacono and stuff. But certainly it shows that they're going to go out and win games early and often, and even if they can suffer some growing pains, they should be in contention in March, if not a Final Four team.
Well, Matt, let me throw it over to you. Maybe the question here is when we look at teams like this, is this the formula for winning, or is Villanova's formula of the veteran leadership maybe the formula for actually winning a championship as opposed to getting lottery draft picks in your program?
I think it's almost you need some kind of veteran presence and experience. They might not necessarily have to be your best players, but I think they need to be key parts of the rotation. And I'll throw one that's sort of in between these two, and that's Kansas now. When they picked up Josh Jackson, you had Jackson, who's might be the best recruit in the country out of all these guys, and it's a very good class. These guys, this will be the top 10 of next year's draft, probably might be all freshmen. But you had Jackson, two of the returning guys like Frank Mason and Devontae Graham, and that Kansas, this might be the key. You have veteran key people who have done it before, and now you're adding a top-flight talent like Jackson.
Yeah, I mean, and it really is. It's and one thing that we've been seeing now, it's been going back for a little bit on Twitter. I think, John S., you saw a little bit of this, or maybe Matt, it was you that were discussing it, the going back and forth on Twitter between Kentucky and Duke. Some of it was taken down, but they're starting to go to each other a little bit here, these schools, back and forth.
No, yeah, like there's Cal and Kay, I don't think really like each other, and Calipari took a shot at Duke after Derek Thornton transferred, saying like he's not going to be set for life by going to Duke after all, and then now today Duke fired back after Marcus Bolden committed. When Calipari said we could reel in basically whatever fish we want, Duke had an answer that no, you really can't.
Well, David, do we need to get these two teams playing in the regular season, like, immediately?
Yes. I don't think this was part of the Griggs-Lenardi awesomeness series. We'll reference that a little bit later in the summer again from our last podcast, State of the Union. But, of course, they should be playing every year. And I encourage – I think all coaches should settle all their problems on Twitter. I mean, I love this. I think it's great theater, and I don't know why they took it down. I don't know why their superiors told them to stop. I mean, I think that making like a coach, a grown man, making fun of other players is wonderful, and Twitter's the place to do it.
That is an interesting question. I don't think we've ever really discussed this issue here. But in all seriousness, with the way social media and Twitter is these days, is this right for these coaches to be going out there and posting stuff and about other teams and other players, or does we really need to stop this in all seriousness? John T., let me throw that over to you.
I mean, I don't think that any coach who's worth his salt needs to be on Twitter going after another coach. But that being said, I've seen recruits who have said in the stories that come out after they pick a college that they like the love that they got from that coach or that program or his staff. So the recruits are on the Twitter and checking out what the coaches say. So it's a part of everyday life, but I would take the high road and not go after another school myself.
I would not take the high road.
Well, David, we've seen some of your tweets, so. But we had a couple other topics we did want to hit on here, and one of them actually has to do with TV rights. Actually, two of them have to do with TV rights. First of all, David, let me stick with you for a second here. The NCAA does have an extension of the NCAA tournament deal with the CBS/TBS that's going to have basically the same model for the tournament going on for I think the next 10 million years.
Yeah. Well, what it is that it was the original deal was through 2024, and I believe it was $11 billion for the 13 years or 14 years. It has since been expanded for another $8 years, so through 2032, for another $8.8 billion. And that's more than $1 billion a year. And what it comes out to is essentially $19 billion for 24 years or 22 years, I think 23 NCAA tournaments. And if you break down the math, that comes out to about $13 million a game. That's the average. That's the opening round. That's the 1 versus 16s. That's the average per game that the NCAA is making off of this new television deal. And I just love it. I mean, the reason I think that this is a great thing, first, it assures the exposure on CBS Turner, all the games in their entirety, and we need that kind of coverage for the wonderful amateur sport that this is.
Well, and I'm kind of disappointed, though, that they took this extension as opposed to accepting our Hoops HD offer to broadcast the games right here.
Right.
We did offer them a beer, I think, and a night out in the town with David Griggs.
We offered them, well, what we offered them was TBA, I think, in that letter that I sent them.
Okay. But the other TV news that came out, and Matt, we got you back on the feed. We lost you there for a second. Yeah. But John S., let me throw this over to you here. The Big Ten and Conference USA, both a little bit TV news. And let's start with the Big Ten, where the news is that there's a chance they may not be back on ESPN with the new TV rights. That it is, and all indications right now are that ESPN may be out of the running for the Big Ten rights.
Yeah, in Big East country, we know a thing or two about getting away from the mothership. But one of the things that the Big Ten has done is they've agreed to a certain number of football games that are going to be on the Fox family of networks, where they already have their championship game. And since they also have a share of, well, Fox has a share of the Big Ten network, they've already had some football and basketball games as part of that package. So they're also going to have some college basketball games. And I don't think it's going to be the following year, but 2 years from now is when the new TV deal is supposed to start.
Right. Yeah, I do have a question, and I wish Lee Del Vecchio was here to explain this, and I'm actually being serious. The deal was Fox got half of the first tier rights. How do you have
a ton of money
tiers? How does that work?
Basically, they paid a ton of money for half of the rights, and I mean, it's an unbelievable amount of money they were paying per game, at least in football, from what I understand.
Yeah. But the only...
Okay,
go ahead, man.
Quickly jump in there. I think it's like Fox will have the first tier rights, and it's then the second tier that are still kind of up in negotiations, I believe. Okay. At least that's the unofficial, kind of official stance.
Well, while on the topic of conferences that got away from the mothership of ESPN and now it came crawling back, the other conference whose TV rights were up for this year was the Conference USA. Got a small package back on ESPN as part of the deal. Also still has a package, I believe, on CBS Sports Network and a package on... are we there still?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, they've also got a package on the American Sports Network.
Yes.
A fourth tier, I guess, is now Conference USA, is now on the network formerly known as Al Jazeera Sports, now known as BN Sports. David.
Yes.
Now we know why Chad was stumbling, because he was trying to figure out how to pronounce that network.
BN Sports it's out of I think it's headquartered somewhere in the Middle East, but they specialize in a lot of international soccer. And the one way CUSA could spin this is that hundreds of millions of people watch the sporting events that BN broadcasts. Now, almost none of them are watching it on BN because that's who's showing it in America. But yeah, essentially, there are more people watching this podcast than are probably watching BN Sports right now. Conference USA really needed more exposure, and BN Sports really needed quality content if they wanted to break into American football in college and pro basketball.
So, David, you're saying they both failed epically.
Yeah, they both failed. It's just the last thing either of them needed was each other. Oh, Lord. I get it. I get this. Do any of you actually get that channel? I know Matt probably does because Matt's a soccer guy, but do you even know what BN is? Like I was having
Actually,
to
we
explain
do
it.
have it as part of our, I think, our sports pack here in Time Warner. So you can get things like La Liga
Yeah.
for Spain, and I think what is it, French and the Italian soccer leagues as well.
Yeah, League One from France, and I mean, yeah, that's what it shows. It has like CONMEBOL World Cup qualifying, Copa America. It basically has events that if you're in Europe, you're destroying the ratings, but not in the United States.
Well, good luck to Conference USA and
And
good luck to
I'm David, by the way. You can't see that on the bottom of my screen, but I'm David. Thank you for having us.
yeah, good luck, Conference USA with that. I guess one other topic we want to hit on here, or two other topics we want to hit on. We'll get to our final topic, which is probably our more controversial one in a moment. But there has been some news coming out about potential realignment. Not much realignment that's actually officially announced for next season, other than I believe Coastal Carolina's move. But Wichita State has been talking again realignment, talking even FBS football, but nothing's really happened. John S., you seem to be reacting to that. Is there some news you have about it?
Not really any news other than some of the rumors we've read on some of the other websites. They've actually contacted one of their notable alums in Bill Parcells to see what the feasibility would be as far as setting up football at the FBS level, although it would seem that the logical place for them to be, if they were to go to that point, would actually be to join the American Conference, and it would actually be pretty close to schools like Tulsa, SMU, but I've also heard that the Mountain West could possibly be an option, especially if Hawaii is no longer able to continue as their 12th member for purposes of holding a conference championship game.
Well, that's no longer a requirement, though, either. They did get rid of the 12-team membership in football, so it's not required, although the Big 12 is also seriously talking expansion as well.
Right.
David, I know we've been talking about this for a while, but it really sounds to me from what I'm hearing that the Big 12 wants to add 2 more teams, if for nothing more than to have the greater inventory of games to sell to networks.
Yeah, and it is kind of interesting. A couple things about Wichita State. First of all, the Mountain West, great fit. I mean, if you've ever been to Kansas, Mountain West. I mean, lots of. And secondly, like the Big 12, or yes, the Big 12. Did you hear this? They were actually interested in inviting Wichita State because they wanted to get a second football team in there from Kansas, and then they realized that the Kansas Jayhawks actually do have football along with Kansas State. Kind of forgot about them. And, the question is, if Kansas wanted to give their football program to Wichita State, just give it to them. If you're Wichita State, do you accept it, or do you say, no thanks, we'll start our own?
That is a good question.
Anyway, I'm sorry, Chad. What was your?
I was going to throw it over to Matt here. Matt, do you have any other news?
I think Wichita State, when they released the story to Dennis Dodd of CBS Sports, they clearly indicated they're shopping themselves around. And like, if I'm the Valley behind the scenes, I'm preparing for not the if, but basically the point, the when Wichita State takes off as soon as they find a suitable partner. I think the American probably is the best fit, especially if they go to football. If they're not able to do football, I'd kind of see them maybe going like other schools like Butler and Butler and VCU, and then go to the A-10. That's prior to Butler going to the Big East. They did have a stopover in the A-10.
A very brief one, yeah. But John T., let me throw it over to you. I mean, if we are seeing the Big 12 really does expand 2 more teams, maybe there's an issue with Hawaii leaving the Mountain West, Wichita State moving up to FBS. Are we gearing up for another round of actually some serious realignment here, like we saw over the in the past few years?
We are. I don't think it's ever going to go away, and I keep hearing rumors, which I've heard for several years, that we're going to end up with these 4 power conferences of like 16 teams each, and I hope it's just a myth because I'm kind of old-fashioned. I like that you have 10 or 12 in your I mean, as a Pac-8 guy from way back in the day, like I'll take 8. But it's kind of inevitable. I mean, I also never thought the Ivy League would have a basketball postseason tournament, so what the heck do I know?
Yeah, well, I don't know if it's going to be 4 conferences, maybe 5. The ACC, I don't think, is going to fold into anything, and they're now seriously talking about an ACC network as well, maybe a Big 12 network down the line, too, but that may a lot of that depends on what's going on with the Longhorn Network and ESPN, which paid 300 million times more than it was worth for that thing.
Right, and the Big 12 situation is fascinating. I don't know all of the specifics and facts, but I know a lot of the generalities. So, if one of you all know more of what's going on, let me, stop in the correct. But Texas, as an institution, is, I think, against expansion, but the Texas Board of Regents, which oversees the university, is for expansion, and they would like, I mean, they like the idea of Houston getting into that league. So you have Texas and Texas Tech, who want nothing to do with Houston, being told by the Board of Regents that they have to get out there and fight for Houston. Oklahoma, on the other hand, is for expansion, but the Oklahoma Board of Regents is not. So, I mean, you have a real fascinating, I mean, what an intriguing mess and that you have. And the candidates, I think the big four, I would think, are Memphis, Cincinnati, UConn, and I've heard in Houston, and somebody mentioned Colorado State. Is Colorado State really serious? I mean, they're not successful, and what they make, lack in success, they make up for with poor attendance. I don't get wanting them at all.
No,
Colorado State is about bringing back the Denver Market to the Big 12 after Colorado went to the Pac-12. But Colorado State has had a few decent years in football, but nothing earth-shattering.
Do they have the Denver? Does anyone in Denver? Well, anyway.
Yeah. Well, let's move on to one last topic we want to hit here today. And generally, we tend to stay away from political issues and the like. And but we've got one going on now that may actually have an impact on college athletics. Down in the state of North Carolina, where I believe it's called House Bill 2, recently passed, basically saying that regarding transgender use of restrooms, and that you must be based upon your actual birth gender. And I don't want to get into too much the politics beyond that, but the NCAA has basically said, well, we consider this discriminatory, and that we don't want championships there, or various schools have said, we don't want championships there. It's the Department of Justice has come out and said that this is a violation of Title IX, becoming a very hot topic issue now nationally, whether this is going to go ahead or not. And David, let me start with you, because I know you wanted to briefly discuss this. Although, quite frankly, I don't know which restroom puppets are supposed to use.
Well, puppets use. I'm glad you asked that, Chad. Puppets are like transgendered people. We use whatever the hell restroom we want, and chances are, unless you're checking, you don't realize we're in there anyway. So there's the answer to that. Like, I kind of just, with that being said, I think everybody's freaking out over nothing, because the law is basically unenforceable anyway unless you have a monitor, and transgendered people have always used whichever restroom they feel comfortable using without issue, and people that suddenly have an issue with it now probably just didn't realize that they've been in the same restroom with a transgender person before. But that aside, I don't really know if this is the right answer. I don't think Ole Miss's athletic department in Mississippi State, North Carolina, NC State, Wake Forest, Duke, UNC Wilmington, I don't think refusing for schools to refuse to go there, and then Tennessee as well is another one where it's coming up, is the answer. I just don't see what that accomplishes. It's been my experience that most in college athletics, by a wide margin, support the LGBT community. And so the people that are really being affected by these boycotts the most are the ones that kind of are on the side ideologically with the NCAA. So why are you kind of punishing your own allies? And secondly, are these boycotts effective? Are they really effective in changing people's hearts and minds? I mean, the 1968 Olympics, for instance, or the 36 Berlin Games. I mean, would Jesse Owens have had a bigger impact had he not gone there at all and boycotted than he had by going there and competing? I think that a lot of it is posturing without really. I take a lot of it as being disingenuous, personally.
I don't think it's going to affect the immediate sites that have already been announced, like Greensboro, Raleigh, Winston-Salem, wherever they've gone for the past 2 to 3 years. But one of the things that could possibly happen if it were to be moved, what about possibly going down south to South Carolina, where the NCAA finally lifted their ban after they took down the Confederate flag last year? They've got sites in Greenville and Columbia that would be more than NCAA tournament ready if they get the call.
Well, let me throw it over to John T. and first, then Matt. If your thoughts on these issues here, and I mean, do you think that the NCAA should be taking these type of actions and getting involved in this issue, or do you agree with David? It's kind of a non-issue.
Regardless of whether or not they should or shouldn't get involved, it is an issue. So the good news for the NCAA is that they don't need to be a leader; they can be a follower. As you probably know, on February 19th, Charlotte is supposed to host the NBA All-Star Game. If there's a ban or boycott and the game gets moved out of Charlotte, I feel pretty confident that the NCAA attorney is going to follow and it's going to move out of any North Carolina site for the immediate future. It has already taken effect, the issue in Phoenix. Don Rogers last week, the executive director and CEO of the 2017 Phoenix Local Organizing Committee for the Final Four, reached out to the NCAA to get some clarification. Arizona does not have laws against LGBT people specifically. However, they lack laws that expressly protect the rights of LGBT people. And Don Rogers, who runs the show for the organizing committee, wants to know, do we need to get a law in place in the next 10 months, or is it okay if we don't have a bad law in place? This is an issue. It's going to culminate in February and March of next year.
Right, and I mean, I think this is that these issues will all eventually be decided by the U.S. Supreme Court, but we could be looking at several years down the line, and obviously all these events will be taking place before then. And if there are these move-outs and are these boycotts, we're going to be finding that out. But Matt, do you think that that's what we're going to see is the boycotts?
I would say either go
games?
one way or the other, and they'll have a sweeping boycott where every sports organization, all that, they all decide to boycott, or where David says maybe show a sign of solidarity to those who most part probably agree with their stance on the issue, and then do that and almost fight the cause from within. Now, I will say quickly pertains to North Carolina, I believe that Roy Cooper will defeat their current Republican governor in November. He's currently ahead in the polls, and just to throw a little bit of politics in, but as you do, if he wins, he might just say, okay, I'm repealing this law as soon as I get in office, and then therefore it might be too late for the NBA All-Star Game, but for anything maybe like 2018 and beyond, I think if the new Democratic governor gets that law off the books, then...
Now you're talking about one branch of the government because I think, as Matt had pointed out, it is an election year for the governor, but I still think they get, 2-year terms for representatives down in North Carolina. I don't know how their Senate would go, whether it's 4-year terms or how they rotate it, but the voters are definitely going to have some kind of say as to whether or not that bill is going to stay on the books or not within the next calendar year.
I gotta say that what's really sound to me, from listening to each of you, is that what we have here is a law that almost has no meaning because it's really unenforceable, yet is going to cause a lot of financial problems for the state of North Carolina. It's going to cause a lot of black marks on them as NBA All-Star Game and NCAA tournaments start pulling out of there. I don't understand the law. It makes no sense to me.
Right.
Other than it is a bunch of people that are stuck in about 1916 and not 2016.
And let's not say it was also going to pass a similar law, and I think they were also going to be under the gun as far as could their Super Bowl had been ripped from the city of Atlanta. I think there were so many other things in place where their governor finally just said, I'm not going to pass this law. It's not worth it. Now it's just North Carolina, Mississippi, and I think someone said Tennessee is another state that could possibly pass such a questionable bill.
It is pending in Tennessee, a very similar bill as well, yes.
Now, because John Stalika just gave an example of a sports boycott that worked, which is interesting. And I want to make sure, I said it earlier, but I don't know if I said it pointedly enough. I support the rights of the LGBT community. I am against the passing of the law because I just, like I said, I don't think it's. I think it's basically a non-issue. It's unenforceable, and no one. It's just not something that's a problem. What I am against is hurting the college athletes and the college students that punishing them to make a political statement, especially in the second layer to that is most of them, pretty much all of them, would be on your side ideologically. That's where I have a problem with this. Does that make sense? I'm speaking puppet here, but did that make sense?
I think it does. I guess on that note, let me turn to each of you. I think we've covered most of the topics that we were going to get into tonight, but let me run through each of you, find out if there's anything else you want to discuss briefly or any other final thoughts. Matt, let me start with you.
No, I'd say I think one thing I might have missed this part of the discussion is the coaching changes, and since I've always kind of followed it sort of from afar, that I really want to focus this year and maybe keep track, take notes, whatever, and see how year one you might not see it as much, but down the road, how especially a kind of controversial hire that I think actually might work is Kevin Stallings in Pittsburgh, and I think Stallings is a good coach. His time clearly ran out at Vanderbilt. That I don't think any doubt of that. But I think a fresh start. I think he hired a pretty good staff. I know Kevin Sutton from Georgetown went there, among others. And that in this new, fresh start, I think he might have more success than people realize there at Pitt.
Yeah, that is a good point. We didn't really discuss many of the coaching changes. Maybe that'll be something we could get into more detail on in one of our future months coming up here. But John T., any other thoughts or any other comments?
I'll do a coaching change comment. There's been a lot of big names. The one I'm looking at is Steve Peichel, who's moving from Stony Brook, where he was 3-time Conference Coach of the Year in the past 5 years, taking the big leap to Rutgers. He played under Jim He assisted under Calhoun at UConn. His new team at Rutgers, they're not losing a lot of seniors. They bring back most of their leading scorers. And the one thing they didn't have last year in Rutgers, well, there were many things they didn't have. Defense was one of them. Stony Brook was top 20 in the nation in defense. If he can teach that team that already knows how to score to play a little defense, they're not going to win the Big Ten. They are going to compete, I think, in the years ahead.
John, did I ever tell you how much I respected you and how wonderful you are?
All the time, but I never tire of hearing it.
Well, on that, let me actually go through the rest here. I thought that was a great place to end, but I guess we shouldn't. John S.
If you can't beat them, join them. Jim Engels, the former coach of NJIT, has taken the head coaching position at Columbia after NJIT had lost in the year and Columbia had actually won the CIT. And I'm sure one of our biggest fans, and Angela Leno from College Insider, I think had also heartily approved the move of Engels to Columbia. But let's not forget there's another under-the-radar move in Rick Stansberry. How will he do at Western Kentucky? And did they upgrade over their former coach and Ray Harper?
Yeah, and that's the Jim Engels move. I'm a little bit confused by it, honestly, because I think that Jim Engels maybe would have taken one more year, but I think he could have gotten even a better job than that at Columbia. I think that he could have been bordering on a more major conference. I'm not going to say a Power 5 conference, but an A10 team or the like. But maybe he'll end up there after a couple of years at Columbia. But David, let me throw over to you. Last but not least.
Yes, I am David. Thank you for being with us. You can't see my name down there because Google's not letting me do it. But one of the things we haven't talked about this in a while is we need to bring the border war back, and it's just got to happen. And
on that note, I want to thank everybody for joining us here, and we're going to talk to you again real soon. Have a great evening.